Cliches retire, we set them free, shaking the ground with epiphany. Fresh thinking loud, it's our decree. Unconventional wisdom dancing on the beat.
Hello, and welcome to Unconventional Wisdom, about conventional wisdom. I am your host, Kim Miller-Hershon. I'm so excited to be having a conversation today with John Suarez, and I think you're going to be excited too once he starts talking. John, please introduce yourself, and then we'll start conversing.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Kim. I'm very excited for this conversation. My name is John Suarez. I currently work at a marketing agency called SmartBook Media as their senior director of client operations. So that means I just oversee a team of really talented, really brilliant marketers and specialists that are the point people for client accounts and client work.
Awesome. And you have a lot of people on your team.
Yeah, the agency world, we're always shifting around parts, but right now I have 10 people. So sometimes that balloons up to 15 or so, but 10 or 8 is about usually where I sit at the minimum.
Okay. I think you'll have a lot of gems to give us around leadership. And like you said, it's also a bit fluid, right? And which is good and sometimes very challenging.
Yeah, learn new personalities, new sensibilities, new dynamics, but it's all part of the fun.
All right. We are dying to know what you are currently streaming.
My favorite show right now, the thing I'm streaming, is The House of Guinness on Netflix. Think Succession mixed with Peaky Blinders. And it's about Succession, this family business and the drama of trying to take over control. And Peaky Blinders is this early 1900s Irish kind of mobster show. And it's fantastic. I love it. I've already watched the whole thing, and I'm waiting for the next season because they've already announced it. I don't drink Guinness. It's a little too dark and heavy for my taste.
You know what? I don't know that this is an appropriate thing to talk about, but we're going to talk about it anyway.
Let's do it.
So I am one of those people who really and truly loves the taste of alcohol. I like to drink.
Yeah.
Not a fan of beer. I just don't like the taste of it.
So when you say beer, what kind of beer are you getting into? Have you tried it all, or are you just like thinking like a standard lager or something like that?
I actually, maybe this doesn't count, but in college, I did try Guinness.
Okay. This
which is not for the faint of heart.
Is sponsored by Guinness for those of you watching.
Yeah, that's so funny. Not
interesting. So not even the sweet side.
No. And actually, you know what? If you saw me taste it, like it is just so offensive on my palate.
We should have a beer together because I would like to see that.
Only if you promise to then have a bourbon with me.
I can make that promise.
Yeah, I am a huge bourbon fan. So
I've dabbled. I am like a peasant in bourbon land. I have good friends that know it really well. It's like wine, right? If you know it, you know it.
Right.
And they'll take me around and tell me places and tell me things to try. But I'm just a passenger when it comes to bourbon. And I love it because it's great. I really like drinking it, but I just don't have the background or knowledge to really know what's good or not.
Yeah, you could say the same thing about wine. You know, what's good is what tastes good to you.
Right. Do you like the taste?
Because although we don't live in the same place in California, we both live in California, and like tons of craft breweries around, right? So we can get some pretty spectacular beer and it all tastes terrible to me.
Hey, it's just not for you, which is fine. Yeah. In San Diego, there's of course a bunch here too. So I love just exploring little pop-ups, new breweries, this or that. Of course, there's a lot of that, but then there's even more wine country up in like the San Francisco Bay Area. So I'm jealous of you because I do love a glass of wine too.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, we actually joined our first wine club. So
fancy.
I know. And you know what's so funny? We went up there to Napa for a tasting and it was quite warm out. It was like 100 degrees out. So the way that I picked this winery is their tasting is in a cave. It had a good rating.
What was winery?
It's called Pine Ridge.
Pine Ridge, okay.
It's on the Silverado Trail.
Yeah.
We really did have a delightful tasting, and now we're wine club.
That's all it takes is one wine club and or one trip to Napa. And you're like, I don't quite like this on the nose, but Going down, it's quite smooth, isn't it?
There you go. And we are fortunate that we live in the San Francisco Bay Area, so we're very close to Napa. Like just
Yeah.
drive. It's very under an hour.
We're a bit spoiled here in California, but you especially being where you're at.
Yeah. Okay, enough about alcohol. Let's get into leadership. All right. So, you know what? I was stopping myself because, listener, we evidently are beverage connoisseurs. John and I share a love of coffee, and he has decided that I am a total coffee snob. We have quite a few beverage affinities that we share. All right. So, John, what is one piece of conventional wisdom that you followed early on? And what I really mean by this is, what did you think success was going to look like? What did either society tell you was modeled for you? Like the first company you joined, it looked a certain way. And then how did you figure out, like, that is just not going to work for me?
Yeah, there's a lot of things to unpack there, but I think in a nutshell, coming into the workforce, coming into leadership, I think I saw success as just the title, the pay, the respect that came with both of those things, and the command of the ship, so to speak, right? You're making the decisions, you're able to unfold your vision or sometimes lack thereof, and things start happening, things start moving because of those decisions, which I do think in many parts that's what it looks like to move up the corporate ladder, to move up in positions in leadership, or to run a company, or be a part of an organization's board, or what have you. But I think one thing that I kept hearing early on is to just say yes and accept every opportunity, which it's a bit two-folded there. I think when you're straight out of school and getting into the workforce, when you have the energy and you don't have as many commitments, personal, professional, or otherwise, accepting every opportunity, saying yes, making connections really is the main thing that benefited me at least the most. But there comes a point when you say yes to enough things, whether it's at your salary job or you're doing something on the side, which I do think is very important to do, especially early on, where you've reached critical mass of things you can take on, and then you have diminishing returns in terms of the energy you put forth, in terms of the output you get for your work. So I think for me now, if it's not a hell yes, then it's a no. So just learning to say no to way more opportunities than I do yes, because as you start to get more higher up in leadership or develop more connections, more opportunities inevitably come to you. So you just have to really learn how to say no, which is for high performers like you and probably everyone listening to this podcast is probably hard to do, because you're like, yes, I can do that. Or what if I don't do this? How's it going to cost me? But what if you don't do it? How's it going to benefit you? How much more energy are you going to have to spend on that other thing?
If I don't do it, how is that going to benefit me? Wow. I don't think I've ever heard that phrased that way. We say, okay, what is the opportunity cost? But I do love the way you just phrase that. I think it's much more approachable. Here's the other thing that I think people who are more junior or even mid career can potentially make. This came up with my daughter. So she was at a startup and she was really a jack of all trades, which you need to be in a startup. And she was very lucky because she finished a project and they came to her and they said, okay, here are some opportunities that you can plug into. One of those opportunities, they actually asked her to lead a sunsetting legacy product into its retirement. I'd heard a speaker, the actually CEO of AMD microprocessors, speak a while before. And somebody asked her how she moved up in her career. It was a very straightforward answer, but for me, it was such a mic drop moment. And what she said is, as you're moving up, you take on the projects that are priorities for leadership, right? So,
Well said.
so my daughter came to me and she said, "What do you think?" I'm like, "Hell no." Right? Like, why are you going to put your effort into something that they're retiring?
Exactly.
That doesn't make any sense. And I think as sometimes we think that no is a dirty word, right? That it's going to actually limit your opportunities. I think the question is exactly what you said is what opportunities do you then create for yourself? And I think the other thing, John, that is important here is you don't always have to know where you're headed. You can, but sometimes an opportunity will come up when you're not looking for it and you're like, that's interesting. But to just say yes to everything, that's a very bad model for yourself.
And on the point of not necessarily knowing the destination where you're headed, I think being in a good organization can make up for that. If you have good senior leadership, blind faith, I think, is always a bad thing. But to some extent, you can put that blind faith into leadership and just learn and listen. And listening is so important, and observing. It's just how any human learns anything. So why should it be
Right.
different in the workforce?
Yeah. And even to that point, when you surround yourself with really quality people, even if they're not the most senior leadership, but they're a number of levels above you, that has paid off in spades for my daughter because in the tech world, people move around, people get laid off, right? They go to other opportunities, and she just keeps getting tapped. Hey, I'm now at this company and we need you.
That's exactly right. Yep. And there's a lot of people that both I've been a part of their team or people that have been a part of my team that you just know when you see it. You don't need to be the most senior person. You don't even need to be the smartest person. I think for me, the unteachable or two unteachables is having a good attitude. So showing up and like, all right, we're human, we're here, we're alive. What are we getting done today? And the second unteachable, I think, is being able to have that figured out mentality of just, okay, I don't know the answer. I'm going to try to figure it out myself. We are in 2025. The internet's been around for a long time. AI's now been around for a long time in terms of tech time. Whenever people have this attitude of, I will figure it out, all the resources are in front of you. I think that shows through to anyone. If you're a leader of people, your people see that and they want to follow you and be led by you. To your leadership, they say, this is somebody I can rely on.
And I think it does start from the top. Whatever the coming in with a positive attitude or being teachable,
Yeah.
I think those things also have to be modeled. Because I think the other thing, and you tell me if you agree with this, I think the other piece of this is that, I don't know, this sounds like very highfalutin to have psychological safety. Things need to be figured out, and you need people to figure them out. Somebody needs to be able to raise their hand and say, I don't know, or I need help, or whatever it is, because I'm assuming you're an agency, you've got budget. Somebody uses so much time to try to figure something out that collaboratively they could have figured out in a quarter of the time. They're just using budget and resources that really make jobs potentially not profitable.
That's exactly right. On raising your hand and asking for help, something I picked up not too long ago, like 3 or 4 years ago, on all of my one-on-ones with people on my team, I would always ask, can I help you? But I changed that from can I help you to how can I help you? So it's an open-ended question.
That's right.
So it's funny, adding one word in before that, when I just said, can I help you? 9 times out of 10, it would be no. How can I help you? It's, oh, now I have to actually think, how can I? Because it's an open, just that small shift, I think, made
Right.
such a big difference. And I think there's a lot of those little small shifts as
That's right.
leaders that we can all make to make our team more comfortable. And at the end of the day, just more productive, just happier, I think.
I agree. I think The way that I would define that is that what you're saying is you're assuming that they need help, right?
Yes.
So they don't have to say, yes, I need help, which can be a harder thing. The other way that I like to do that is, what questions can I answer?
I love that.
Because it's not, do you have any questions? Because then again, you get into that, is this safe to ask this question? I don't want to look dumb. I should know that. Whatever head trash goes on about that stuff. When you ask, what questions can I ask? You're just assuming that somebody has questions. You just want to know what they are.
Exactly. And as leaders, that's our job, is just to help our team. They're probably going to have something they need help with, even if they don't know too. So assuming that they need help, if they don't know it in the moment you ask them, they'll start thinking about it. And maybe not that time, but maybe the next time they'll be like, oh, Kim's going to ask
Right.
me this question again. I
And
have some back pocket questions that I'm going to bring to our.
I think that just make, I'm sorry. There are so many things so
Oh
many
yeah,
places to go with that. Those are subtle, and yet they just have such a big impact. And I think that they are ultimately very important. And I imagine, I guess there isn't really a way to measure this, but I imagine that if you did something like a net promoter score or employee satisfaction survey or looked at your retention numbers, if there was a way to compare having a team where you do that and having a team where you ask only black and white questions, I imagine that even statistically, you would have very different outcomes.
no doubt in my mind.
Yeah, good. All right. John, you sound like you got it all figured out. For those of you listening, you might not see him, but we're assuming that you are a relatively young guy. You have moved up in your career. You're already a senior director. So you've figured out a lot of things. What's one thing that you still wrestle with?
Just one, huh? Or any number. I think for me, and I hope this sounds familiar to some people, I don't think I'm alone here, but balance, and specifically how to balance my effort and attention. I think, especially for my age and younger, people just entering the workforce where you've been in front of a screen your whole life. And that's no indictment against any generation. It just means that your attention is more fought for than any other generation, which means it's
Mm,
harder to manage where to spend that time and effort. So going back to the answer, balance and how to balance my effort is something I'm constantly like struggling with. And practically what that means for me is, so inside of work, like it is a daily struggle for me to figure out exactly where to focus my attention when I have, okay, I have an hour block between meetings and I have my to-do list for the day and I get that done. And maybe I have a couple other things. So not only prioritizing, but as I'm doing something, not saying, let me also do this other thing. Let me answer this Slack or email, because the switching cost of going from one thing to another, I know is costing me minutes on the hour, if not more than that. And that over a day and over a week is just burning a lot of time. If I could just focus on one thing throughout the day, okay, 30-minute block, boom, I'm going to do that. Whenever I'm on a call with somebody, I've very intentionally muted my Slack and any notifications, because for a long time, I found that I was constantly checking Slack, which is incredibly rude of me. I should be giving somebody my full attention, but also just waste the whole meeting time in general, because you're not giving that person everything that they came to the meeting for. Yeah, just balancing time and effort. And I still need coffee in the morning to help me focus a little bit, especially when I'm just waking up. And it's something that I probably will struggle with for a lot longer, but I've identified it. I've tried to train my mind to, okay, it's creeping up on you. No, revert your attention, or just going for a walk helps me. I try to meditate a couple times a week. That helps me center my brain, but it's just always there, always something else.
yeah, I appreciate that. I think I also live that, even though I am a time management expert. But here is something that's so interesting. And I'll tell you, because I just don't have a memory for these things. We'll put it in the show notes what the study is, but I kid you not, John, there is a study out there that says that multitasking makes you dumber than when you're high?
I believe that 110% because somebody will like, let's say I'm in the office or something and I'm multitasking. Somebody will come in and ask me something and it'll take me like 5 seconds to figure out what I'm going to say sometimes. I'm like, yeah, what am I doing here? My brain is in a million places and now it needs to sync up to a third task or something. So
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yeah. When I do my time management seminar, which might be a good tip for you and for any of the listeners. So I think the conventional wisdom is that, like, you might make a note or highlight where you're stopping something that you're working on, right? I actually
Mhm.
have a different take on this. I think what's actually much more helpful for task switching, which we all do a gazillion times a day, is before you leave the one task, don't write yourself a note about where you are. Write yourself a note about what is the next thing you need to do.
Brilliant.
Because the time waste is getting yourself back into it so that you can remember. Even if you know where you were, you still got to figure out where to go. When you're in it, you know what the next step is. Write that note to yourself so that when you go back to it, you're not losing that time.
Yeah, that's an excellent recommendation. And I think that's something I'm going to start working. So, something that I have been doing, I don't do as much individual contributor work anymore unless I'm helping somebody out. But something that I do like to do is record my working sessions, even if it's just one on one, because of the AI summary notes. So, that does step 1A of what you're saying. But taking that to the next step is what are you doing next? And a lot of the note takers, Zoom, Gemini, Fathom, of course, they give you the summary and next steps in there too. So what I'm going to start adding in there at the closing is, okay, my next step is to do this and that. And I don't even watch the recordings. It's that email
Right.
summary that gets sent to me. And it's just right there, headlined, here's your next step. So next time I'm going back to that, I could be like, remind myself. I love
Yeah.
that tip.
All right. So, if you could rewrite the rule book on leadership, what's one outdated belief that you would get rid of and what would you replace it with?
This probably is not volitionary for your audience, but I think that I see it all the time, especially as an agency. We work with so many different companies. You get leadership, and the byproduct of that is the individual contributors and teammates separating work and emotion to where you have this very like robotic, unemotional, kind of unhuman organization. And what I mean by that is, okay, so whenever you first come into the workforce or first step into leadership, I think a lot of times, at least in business school, you hear, okay, they didn't say it explicitly separate like emotion from work, but that's what's instilled. It's, hey, of course, don't talk politics and religion, but don't also talk about your weekend. Don't talk about this or that because like you might offend somebody or they might not find it interesting. In a lot of LinkedIn echo chambers, I don't think this is again news, but I still see it so much in working with all these different organizations. I think it is still happening a lot more than probably your audience or many people know. And like whenever somebody comes on, it's whether it's a team meeting, an agency, it's let's first of all be a human. I think a lot of leaders' first intuition, especially as you step up to your first leadership role, is to protect yourself, to protect the company, to not offend. I think just stopping that and asking yourself, if I were to meet a stranger at a coffee shop or on the street, like you're probably not going to have the same mindset, right? So why would you at work? And I think just making a real connection, giving real advice, you don't have to make any promises, but just be a human. So stop asking
Mhm.
about the weather. Nobody cares. Weather's always the same. In Chicago, every winter, it's gloomy and miserable. In San Diego, it's always sunny and nice. Let's talk about what's going on in your life. What skill did you learn? Did you cook that new thing? Are you going surfing this weekend? And for me, at least, I think some of the bad habits of asking about the weather got ingrained in me in my first couple of
Mhm.
companies. And I had to take time aside to think about, okay, what questions can I ask this week? What can I talk about? If I know somebody watched sports, right, or is a fan of a certain team, I might take 2 minutes to look up what their team did. Or if somebody's gardening, I can talk about what I'm planting, like just things like that. I think a little bit of effort goes a long way. And then full circle to the connection of people will tap you for things if you make that human connection more and more often and for more important and beneficial to you projects.
I don't know if I'm embarrassed to say this or not, but I love what you just said about do a little research. I will say that probably earlier in my career, I would have thought to do that, but I just think that is brilliant. I just love that. That just shows that you really do care about connecting with people. And you don't have to be an expert. You shouldn't ever pretend you know something that you don't know. We had the conversation earlier about bourbon. So, what's interesting for me about bourbon is that I'm not a fact person. So, you can, and I'm a huge wine connoisseur, but if you ask me what the mash is on any particular bourbon, I'm like, let me go get the bottle and I'll look it up for you. And then if you ask me 10 minutes later, I probably wouldn't be able to tell you because that's just not how my brain works. But I love bourbon. I probably have 50 bottles of bourbon at my house, right? If you want to taste different bourbons, come on over. Let's do that. But if you want to know about the distillery and about the mash and all those things, I'm not your person.
I'm coming over. We close out here in a second because I think you and I speak the same language.
Right.
Same thing with beer for me. I don't really know. I like the taste of it. I know it's a IPA or a Kolsch, but that's about it.
So I think those are interesting things, but I think the real gem here is put a little effort into connecting with people. I love that. I think that's really cool. And it's just so connecting, right? The fact that you would spend a few minutes of time to think to do that, I think it speaks to your character and what kind of leader you are. I think really what kind of person you are. But I think I would feel very highly of you if I worked for you. And also, too, over time, I would understand that maybe you're not a women's basketball guy, but you know that I love the Valkyries, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you would say something about the Valkyries, and I would be very impressed, right?
Yeah, exactly right. You don't need to do deep research. You don't need to pretend to be an expert. And a lot of the little moments come up naturally. Like you said, if you're a big Valkyries fan, I've had teammates run marathons or do this or that. And you just make a small mental note or an actual note, right? And then the next time you talk to them, before you talk to them, if
Right.
you can look up something related to that, just
Uh-huh.
spend a little bit of time, couple
Right.
minutes. I do think it goes a
Uh-huh.
long way.
You know what is actually very funny? If you ask me what is in bourbon or wine or whatever, or regions, whatever, I'm going to have
Mm-hmm.
a really hard time remembering that. But you tell me something you're interested in or a conversation that I have with you, I will remember it to infinity and beyond, right? Because those connections and so forth, that's my superpower, right?
Yeah, that
Yeah.
speaks to your character. It's like you're more interested in making that connection or making somebody feel like heard. That is
Yeah.
so powerful. And it's really interesting to learn about other things too, right? You're like, oh, I didn't
Yeah.
know that.
Yeah. And sometimes, like, even when you and I were talking and we started talking about coffee, right? What a fun, like, random, trivial connection, but very cool.
Yeah.
And I did say this before, but he did call me a coffee snob.
Kim, even Nespresso knows you're a coffee snob. You're their top 1% consumer. So I think a good cup of coffee.
Yeah, I was telling John that I'm such a good customer of Nespresso that when my coffee maker breaks, they send me a new one. Yeah, there is that. All right. What's one unconventional habit or like mindset shift that's helped you grow your career?
So this might seem antithetical to a lot of what we've talked about to this point, but I do think it's separate in that work-life balance is important. And I think work-life balance is preached from the mountaintops that you need it to avoid burnout. You need to be a human. You need to make connections outside of work in all these things, right? But I think especially early on, work-life balance, and you have to say yes to the right opportunities here, but you have to ask yourself, what do you want? That could be the first question you ask him. What does success mean to you when you first walk in? Is it the title? Is it the position, the power, the money? If you want to buy a house, if you want to get that C-suite job, you have to grind. It's as simple as that. Some people will tell you, but most of the time, what you're going to hear is work-life balance, 40 hours a week, which I don't want to discount that. I don't want to sound like I'm saying don't have work-life balance, but you have to be realistic with where you're trying to get. The reality is there's other people that you're competing against in the workforce. Simple as that. And if you are not willing to put in more than the minimum amount of time, then you should not be expecting more than the minimum, whatever, growth,
Advancement, right?
Advancement, you name it. So for me, especially early on, that meant really grinding at my salary job, but also taking on side gigs. I think somewhat intelligently, but I said yes to a lot of things I shouldn't, but that's all part of learning, right? Just in terms of like time waste, I didn't really learn anything from that, but like having a side gig, and that could mean solo, freelance, something like that. That could mean finding a good partner and building something together. Now, every year I try to do something outside of my salary job. So last year I co-authored a book on the intersection of AI and marketing. It actually took us 15 months to write, which was just a thing of its own, but I knew I wanted to invest my time in that. And we sold a good amount of copies, and it achieved my goal of becoming an author, getting some good press from it, learning about the writing process. So I guess just to come back to where I started, it's about where do you want to go? And then being willing to make the sacrifices, the late nights, the headaches, but knowing you can push through it, right? Because you got to wake up early, you got to work late. And also nobody cares. Like your friends don't care. Your mom might care, your dad might care. But besides that, no one really gives a shit that you're working hard, which, to translate that, hard work is mostly thankless, but you will be thanking yourself in 5, 10, 15 years when you look back and said, oh my God, I did get the position, or I was able to make enough to make a down payment on a house, or whatever. I just think that at least I haven't heard enough people talk about that, especially early on, that you have to really hustle if you want to make a difference for yourself and your growth.
Which is so refreshing to hear, because I think that millennials and Gen Zs get such a bad rap around this issue specifically, that there's this idea that they don't want to work, that they want to have experiences outside of work. And I think what I would say to you, and sometimes like you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your prince. I do think, though, that taking on things that bring you ultimately joy, or that there's an outcome that you're really committed to, that there's the cross section between the outcomes that you're looking for and kind of what you're going to learn from it, like what the experience is, even if it's not all unicorns and butterflies in the process, I think is really important. And I am actually a proponent of thinking through what you want to get out of things. I even have an exercise that I take people through at the beginning of a project, like knowing yourself, where are you likely to run into roadblocks, right?
Yeah.
Either mentally or resource wise, whatever. Think those things through as much as you can. You don't know what you don't know, right? But you know yourself. And what are you going to do when you hit the roadblocks?
That is such, I think, an interesting and really like important kernel of advice, because we talked about attention and balance earlier. Something that I realized for myself is that I work a lot better with a partner. I always have, for a lot of reasons. I like sharing that experience and success with other people, but also to keep myself on track, to keep myself accountable. The Marketer's Manual on Generative AI, I don't think I would have ever published that by myself, just because I would have kept making excuses not to hit the milestones. Okay, I need to have this chapter done by this date, and then the next chapter, and then, okay, I need to really get on the copy editor. Okay, now I need to bring this to design. Taking aside the fact that two people, you divide the work in half, but it makes you accountable. When you tell somebody, Kim, I'm coming on, we're talking at 10 a.m. Pacific time on Wednesday, I'm going to do it. If I say I'm going to record something for myself on LinkedIn at 10 a.m., yeah, maybe I'll hit that, but I only have to be accountable to myself, which I think I'm good at a lot of the time. But with bigger projects, really helps to have that extra motivation.
And what is interesting about me is that I, after all these years, am finally like, yeah, I'm better. I'm better on my own. Like, I'm
It's
better actually without a partner, but I have a team. So they hold me accountable,
great.
right?
Yeah.
It was just very funny because I got a message this morning that said, Kim, where are those edits?
Yep.
You need to get on it. For me, the hybrid is, I'm actually better doing it myself, but with a team. And it goes back to leadership too, where I've created an organization where my team can come to me and say, Kim, you are not holding up your part of the bargain here.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Um, and all right, let me ask you the last question. It's a two-parter. So the last question is if you're going to experience imposter syndrome, or some people think that's a very overused word these days. So self-doubt, right? First part is where is that going to show up for you? And the second part is what do you do about it? What are some tips for somebody who's listening who may also experience imposter syndrome? What do you do?
It's funny, just on the term imposter syndrome, a word is great and encapsulates what you're trying to convey until it's overused. And it's okay, we got
Right.
to go to something else. Imposter syndrome, self doubt, anxiety, whatever you want to call it. For me, I've spoken at conferences, I've spoken virtually at webinars, podcasts, in person and virtually. I think that still speaking to large audiences, and I did this in school and whatever recreationally, but I think it's still in the back of my head. I think, what the hell am I doing up here? Like, why? What do I have to say that's going to be valuable, that is worth all of these people's time, right? So that always creeps up. So it's a constant like, John, shut up. So that, whether that works or not, but I think the thing that gets me past it is, first of all, instead of talking to 100 people, just remember I'm talking to one person 100 times, right? So just one person. And then secondly, like, trust yourself, trust the organizers that put this together, that they actually know how to select a good speaker, and trust that you know what you're talking about in the subject. You should never be speaking on something you're like researching the night before. Of course, you're up there because you know something and you have something to share, right? So from that perspective, you're talking to one person and you already know this thing you're talking about, right? Talking about the WNBA and how, oh my God, I cannot believe they got so lucky to draft this person. But what is that going to cost them in draft picks next year? And then how are they going to do this year with the salary cap and so on and so forth, right? And it's just get excited about it and just let that like excitement overtake you. And that, okay, I do know what I'm talking about. I'm just talking to one person right here, Kim, you and I, and we're just having a conversation. And I think that works for me if I get imposter syndrome or anxiety or doubt with other things too. If I'm talking to somebody with a really shiny resume, a CEO of a big blue chip company or something like that, I'm like, oh my God, what questions or things do I have to say that are interesting? But I just bring it back to, for those conversations, just being human again, right?
That's right.
So
Yeah, I think I might have even said this on the podcast before, but my honestly, absolutely favorite example of that is, and this was really a number of years ago, I met a young man who lived in LA and had sold some property. He was a real estate agent and he had sold some
mhm.
property to some celebrities. And the last time that he was at a gathering, Mariah Carey gave her cell phone number to him saying she was looking for XYZ and if he came across that to let her know. And he was starstruck, having some feelings about that, right?
Mhm.
Talking to a CEO of blue chip company. And at the break, I went over, there was a Barnes and Noble. I went over and I bought him this book called Everybody Poops.
Love that.
And it's, yes, these are quite accomplished people and they are people.
Yeah. That's exactly right. They got there. They got
That's
there.
right. Exactly. I think that I've been, I think, really fortunate in my life to meet some celebrities and so forth. And also, like, their kids were on the same recreational soccer team as my kids, and we sat on the sidelines. There's not a whole lot separating you from that experience. To just be human, I think, is a great thing. And I think the last thing I would say is that you got to read the other person, right? Don't sit there and somebody who's like very boom, don't sit there and make small talk for 5 minutes.
Said exactly. And you're not going to get it right every time. So know that you're going to make mistakes, but the mistakes aren't regrets. They're moments to reconsider what you might do the next time you're in that situation.
Yeah. Because you can't change the past, even if you blew something and maybe there were some big consequences. You gotta just accept that's what happened, figure it out, and move on. Not that you don't have feelings about it, but you can't change it.
It's what Kobe said. I have no regrets. They're just all moments that brought me to where I am today.
Amen to that. Love that. All right, John, we have done it. Thank you so much. I really think that there were some really important things that you said today. I know that you created so much value for people, and I'm just excited that we got to have this conversation. Listener, you know what to do. Download, share, all the good things. Read John's book, all the things. We'll put the link in the show notes and go out there and be a better human.
Cliches retire, we set them free. Shaking the ground with epiphany. Fresh thinking loud, it's our decree. Unconventional wisdom dancing on the beat.